All right, we are live. So what I'll do is, like I normally do, I'll create a post based on my live, and I'll tag both of you so you can share it on with everybody. But welcome back to another month of the C3 Live with our panel and our experts that we bring back every single month. But before we get rolling, I will open the floor to Karen, because Karen, creator, thought, just leader in your own right. Why C3? Why this? Why now?
I've done a lot of reflection over the holiday, and I've realized that, a lot of the things that I do in my career are really just to feel like I'm being valuable and making a contribution. And after 14 years of being mostly a solopreneur, I realized that if I'm really going to be out for what I'm out for, which is creating a better world through improvements to the corporate landscape, then I need to bring other people together to further that. And so it's really all about individuals who are already creating ripples, bringing us together and turning that ripple into momentum to create waves of positive change to make a better world. So this is a place for conscious leaders who have been successful in implementing certain and different realms of their niche to make that contribution, and sharing their secret sauce and putting a spotlight on them, and so that we can share these best practices and case studies across a larger group and get more people implementing the things that are really working to create change. And obviously today's topic, leading through change, happens to be which is voted on by our C3 community. I know that this is kind of like it's like public TV and radio, but on LinkedIn groups where it's what the public demands is what we bring to you in terms of content. So I really thank you, Tiffany, for being here. I'd love to learn more about your expertise. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction on your experience and share the big news that we got to hear?
Sure, absolutely. So let's see. I've always been kind of like the intersection of like operations, people, and change management. So I started my career eons and eons ago back in the big behemoths. So I was operations leadership for Hartford for a couple of years, people, customer facing operations leadership, and then transitioned over to General Motors in the people operations, really more the business operations space, right? And then I had a vice president who I reported to, wonderful mentor, John Meinhardt. If you're listening, I'm talking about you. Had a wonderful mentor get with me and say, you know what, the operations and process, that's your strength, but people are your superpower, and you need to walk in your superpower. And I had no idea what that meant. And because I was managing teams and I was, interfacing with customers and things of that nature, but I finally got it. And like, oh, I need to do what I do for the customer, bring it internally in-house. And so that kind of caused the first pivot in my career over into change management. Spent a couple of years with a couple different organizations, and I led people and change for the city of Atlanta for a couple of years. And then, the went out onto my own for a minute, consulting different companies and bringing people in. And then just a couple of months ago, actually rejoined the corporate, quote unquote, workforce as senior director of HR for Parallel. And I was recently elected president for ACMP Atlanta, the Association of Change Management Professionals Atlanta. So I'm president-elect, and it's probably the only time that I'm ever going to be able to say that in my life.
Congratulations, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Don't try it, because it's a new world order happening right now. So anybody, look, the old school Kevin Garnett when the Celtics won a championship, anything is possible. That's the world we live in.
Much like you, Karen, one of the things that I was doing well in, my own practice and everything, but one of the things that really led me back into kind of this landscape is I'm a firm believer in order to change something, you have to be a part of it. And I wanted to ensure that, as we're going through this time of, 2020 is the year of just everything, right? It's reflection, it's reinvention, it's redirection. But as we're going through that, making sure that I'm actively contributing to that for the next generation of, of this workforce that's coming in. I have a teenage son who will be an adult at the end of this decade, and I want to leave the workplace better for him than when I entered it. So that's kind of,
I hear you.
That's my motivation.
Great. I actually did some recruiting for the Hartford and borrowed something from them. They had a system where when you submitted a candidate, they had to meet 80% of the criteria. And that is a measurement that I teach to other people in terms to developing criteria for their next step in their career, to write a list of criteria and have it meet at least 80% of your criteria and be 80% at least clear that that's the right next step for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I hear you about the kids. You know, I definitely learned some things about the corporate workforce that turned me off to any kind of corporate career when I was younger. Obviously that changed, but, you know, I know that right now it's a much better place than it was when I first entered it and when I was younger. And I just want to continue that momentum. There's been plenty of trailblazers before us who have made things better. And I think we owe it to our kids to continue that momentum of change. Yes, Philip, definitely knowing your superpowers. I actually just wrote a post today that said that my superpower was what I've learned was my superpower was what I thought was my biggest strength, which was being really emotional. You might see me like tear up at times because I just, you know, that's the level I take things in at, and knowing and just being able to embrace that, to be like, you know, hey, you know, I might get a little bit verklempt and, you know, tear up and just because, and it's not always just awful feeling things. Sometimes it's just like, wow, what a great, like, this is beautiful. This is beautiful having everybody together talking about change and what change, how we're going to use change to get to where we want to be in the future. So what is your vision, Tiffany, of how you can use and leverage your career and your new role to further that momentum? What is an ideal picture of what it could look like?
That's a great question. You know, it's all about engagement to me, right? Like I think and you hit on something, you know, about your strength, like you're an empath and that's a beautiful thing. And thinking about, you know, my career journey, and I'm sure we share similar experiences. How many times was that like discouraged within you, right? Like how many times were you, you know, kind of steered off of a path that's just naturally you. And so I think for me, it's engagement and embracing who we are. Like we always say, bring our whole selves to work. That's so cliche. Well, when are we actually going to start doing that and make that okay? And so, you know, in my role now and in, you know, just kind of the other roles that I serve, I'm like, you know, let's be okay to be who we are and be authentic. And with that authenticity, you know, there's certain things that just come along with that. And let's just embrace all of it, right? Like, so I think that for me, that's the vision, being able to, you know, increase that level of engagement, you know, not only within, you know, the corporate sphere, but, you know, just all other spheres and being able to say, you know what? It's okay to be who you are. And I think after 2020, if we can't be who we are after this year, we wasted, there's a lot of time that was wasted, because I'm a firm believer that, yes, this pandemic has, you know, it's terrible as far as like what's happening with COVID and health and everything across the globe. But this pandemic was a reset. And if we don't embrace that opportunity to reset, then we've wasted a whole year.
Yeah. When you think about that reset, Tiffany, and again, me and you have had these conversations as well as Karen, thinking about what it really means, right? Because again, even this next normal and whole self and all that, like it's been very like I still believe people are dipping their toe in that pond, because I'm watching people be a whole lot emotional about the idea that I can be whole and I don't have to compartmentalize or the hats I was juggling, and I try to switch out between depending on who I was talking to. Like I don't believe it was ever manageable. But now people are like, they're throwing the hats down and was like, you know what? My hat is mauve. And that's the hat I'm going to wear because that's me. And so do you really believe that's where we're headed? And is it sustainable?
I think we're headed there. I think we have a lot of work to do to get there. All of this means nothing without intentionality, right? Like if we're not intentional about this, and intentionality, that needs to come from leadership. Like leaders, the one thing that this pandemic did, it exposed the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in that, it exposed a lot of the good, bad, and ugly, a lot of bad and ugly leadership. and so I think, it has to be intentional, and we have to hold people accountable. If it's going to be sustainable, then we have to hold people accountable to really being who we are, embracing who we are, and not necessarily exercising that judgment when who you are is not who I thought you were, So we've got to be, I think it is sustainable. I think that is where we're headed. I mean, sitting on a leadership team and working with my executive leaders in my new organization, just the conversations that we've had in this space about, just what's happening, not even what's happening in the business, but what's happening in the world. I've never had these conversations in any organization, in any leadership team where they've been so real. And I think people are tired of the corporate dance, or people are tired of that. And, I think that we're headed there, but we've got a lot of work to do. But I think it's also too, training up the next generation to come in. They're so much smarter than we are. They're so much smarter than we are.
Yeah.
And they just have a different, Generation Z has just a different way of thinking and really putting those thoughts into action differently than what we've done. And so if we can embrace that, and we can encourage that, and we can really provide that generation with kind of the basics and the foundations and the tools of what we have, it's sustainable.
Yeah. And what really comes up for me, and you said it, this generation coming up, and it was almost like the things that we're talking about, they were being talked about in theory. But the generation coming up, who now the older ones of them are actually early in the workforce. So they're the early 20-somethings interning and graduating. And so, but they actually took what people were saying as truths. And so this thing of authenticity as an actual working value I'm watching it have a clash with people. They're like, oh no, that was just something we had conversations about. And so are you seeing, even in just what change management, OD, in those worlds, are they talking about how to help leaders skill up? I know that's some of the things, conversations. I know Karen's having those conversations. Do we see opportunity for development for our leaders here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But, there's always opportunity for development. Do you want to be developed? So that's the thing with leaders. There's some, and not only leaders, just people in general. Like, you have to embrace, and I keep on using the word embrace, but that's what you have to do. You have to be open to that development. Like, I do see the clash where there's some leader, like, this is how we, the way that we've always done it, right? We've always led this way. We've always done this. Well, this is not that anymore. Like, this is, when we get back to normal, this is normal. Normal is here. We're not.
I've heard Lauren say that all the time. This is the new normal.
Like, this is where we are, and we're not what worked in 2018 or 2017 and beyond. It's not going to work anymore. And did it really, really, truly work then? Like, we're having a lot of conversations in my organization, and then in other organizations that I interface with, about this whole quote concept of work-life balance. Well, that never really existed, right? It's a really phantom concept. It's all about how do we always work, at least here in the States, we live to work. Now, how do we work to live? That's where we need to go, So there's the clash that's there, but there's also my Generation Zs that are coming in. They are challenging that. And I'm loving seeing that, because it's well, why do you do it this way? Yeah, we always do it this way, but why though? And why can't we do something different? Or if we did something different, what is that going to look like? And there are leaders that are very open to listening, because, it's like the 4-year-old, they keep on asking why, and they're like, at a certain point, I'm like, I don't have an answer. It's just because. Mm-hmm. So we've got to get past that. But yeah, it's the clash is there, but there's also, again, there's a lot of people are listening differently. And I think are being a little bit more open-minded, at least from what I'm seeing in the spaces that I'm in.
Yeah, I'm really seeing it as really that conundrum of where now we're the executives and we now have our shot to tell people to shut up and color. And we're like, no, but I had to put my head down and work so hard. And now I got to listen to people. Like, and again, I believe it really comes down to, like you said, what are you willing to do?
Yeah.
And are you really willing to help environments not just be collaborative, but co-create, right? When you talk about innovation, everybody has innovation as a value.
Right.
Innovation naturally insinuates change.
Right.
But when you go in and try to be innovative and creative and all this other things, well, we tried something similar to that. That won't work. And so you slap people, tell them shut up and color based on what's been done, and go sit over there. We'll think about it, right? And when you think about just the new world of change, and I know again, Karen's coaching. I know she got something on this one too. Mm-hmm. What is some things that, and this is going to be a bad word. I'm sorry for the leaders out there that may be listening. What are some things that you're seeing that we have to unlearn?
How long is this? How long is this? We have, and I'll speak from I'm Gen X, late Gen X, early millennial, but I'm an Xennial, right? So that's what
me too. Yeah.
Xennials. And so so when we were told to shut up and color, how much did we hate that? Like we hated it because we could see, there's a different way to do things, or there's a better way to do things. And so when we talk about innovation doesn't mean anything unless there's execution that is associated or aligned to it. So you can be innovative and creative all day long, but if it doesn't, what's the outcome of it? If you're never able to put that innovation or that creativity into practice, then it's just thoughts. It's just, ideas. What we have to unlearn is just that initial, and we've been coached to do it, that initial, that sounds good, but how about sounds good and, that but, like it's always that comma, that hard comma. It's like, sounds good, but have you thought about blah, blah, blah? How about just sounds good and maybe we can think about, things a different way. So I think if there's one thing that we can unlearn that will affect or impact so many things that we have learned over the years, it's that we already go into so many things thinking of the alternative, and we never give ourselves or people the opportunity to just explore the full thought, because we already want to come and edit it already. Mm-hmm.
So I'm seeing like a lot of things that need to be reconciled, because let's go back to Gen Z, because I taught Gen Z and I was teaching them the best practices of careering and conscious leadership. And, they honestly got the conscious leadership part. They really appreciated that part of the education that they got. It was probably their favorite part from the feedback that I got. What they always hated was, these are creatives that I was teaching more recently. There were business students that I taught as well. And the business students seem to just accept, this is the business world. This is the system you have to fit into. It was a little bit easier of a sell. With the creatives, it was like, why do I have to have a Word version of my resume? Why? There's 250 plus ATSs, and we don't know if it's going to accept or reject you, and do something really creative with your PDF and keep it, and great. But for the course, you need a Word version of your, or why does a business letter have that format? Why can't we format it a different way? And there's like a reconciling that has to happen, because they want that creative input, and they have to, like you said, what is the point of being creative if it's not going to get you to a point where you can apply that creativity and do that? And that was a struggle, a back and forth that, had to happen. between us. And I know that someday a lot of them who resisted me the most will look back and be like, I get it, like I had to kind of get there somehow, but in the midst, especially through the beginning of COVID, when their job market went from awesome to completely nil, and the back and forth of giving grace, but holding them accountable, to what they had to learn. And then there's also the reconciling of, well, people are coming in and we want to give them the freedom to be their whole selves and speak their truth. But we also have to create this safe space where you're going to talk and it's going to be a mistake, potentially. Right. You're going to say something that's going to hit somebody in a way. And we talked about this in many of our other Answer the Call to Conscious Leadership calls, where, we're talking about being so particular about your words and being really intentional about how you, how other people receive it, like putting yourself in other people's shoes. And there's that reconciliation about, try to be empathetic to what other people are experiencing and sensitive to their backgrounds, but also create this space where we can bubble up our belief systems that may need some tweaking and adjusting, or bring our belief systems to that and have that be okay in a world where that might butt up against somebody else's belief systems and create tension and resistance. So how do we do that? How do we reconcile these? These are the ways that we've learned that are the best ways to do it for results. And also have some input and have some creativity and contribute these things that you bring to the table that are completely unique. And how do we make the space for people to bring their whole selves to work and create a space where you can speak your mind and we can talk about it in a way where we can find a place to meet in the middle.
So, yeah, there's a lot. And it's so critically important where we are, because I think for the longest time, under the veils of, dare I say, political correctness, we haven't done that, right? So I think the first step in that is, the first reconciliation is understanding that some of the things that are in place really are beneficial. Like, the Word version of the resume, for example, that is something that is beneficial. And it's the foundational pieces of it, right? And but also kind of it being able and willing to explain to people. Sometimes we just say it is what it is. We have to go a little bit deeper now and like, okay, well, it is what it is. And because of XYZ, like, understand, some people have to, with me, I've got to understand, okay, why is this or why is that? Okay, that makes sense to me. I can reconcile it in my thought process. Like you said, there's 250 applicant tracking systems, and this is a standard format for this. That makes sense to me, right? So I think that's the first piece of it, acknowledging that everything that's in place right now, everything doesn't need to be blown up. Everything doesn't need to be blown up. There are some things that really work and that are tried and true, and that we just have to continue to evolve and develop. I think that's the first point of reconciliation. I think the second point of reconciliation, as far as like bringing your whole self to work, is being actually, first of all, do you even know who your whole self is? Do you know who? Because we have been molded and groomed and shaped in so many different ways that, so much of our identity is in who employs us, or where we've gone to school and our education. So first of all, do you even know who your whole self is? I think that's a key piece of it. And doing that introspection, or just to understand, maybe, like, for example, I am an operations person. I can do operations in my sleep, but it's not what I love to do. I am so good at it, but it's not the thing that I like, just energizes me, and just, I can't stop doing it. But there's been so many, instances in our lives, and as we're building our career path, that we've been, you're good at this, so this is who you are. That's not who you are. It's just what you're good at, right? So I think that's the second piece of it, really understanding who your whole self is. And if your representative and your whole self don't align, then there needs to be some probably some changes that are made. And then that third piece of it, creating those spaces, I think it's so simple, but it's the most complex thing to do. I really think it is the golden rule. It is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And yes, we are in a time where we are speaking about things that probably discouraged to speak about. And we have just kind of either not understood the full gravity situations, or we just haven't been very open. And I think that's part of just where we are in this culture, in this society. But being able to, you can speak your mind and you can be authentic and not be a jackass. You can do that, right? I think there's some people that a part of their whole selves, or a part of who they think they are, people mistake authenticity for abruptness, right? I'm just hard. I just tell it like it is. Yeah, that's fine. But there's also a way to deliver information and to deliver, differences of opinion and things, and not just be so, and not make it so personal. And I think that if we just really fall back to kind of the basics of just relationships and engagement, we can get there, but we've got to be able to actually commit to doing that.
Yeah, I love that the kind of correlation between you, Tiffany, and Karen is, and really what's coming up for me is, even in that golden rule, I think a lot of the things, the posters that we put on the wall, they were there aspirationally. They weren't put there for practicality. They weren't supposed to be actionable. And what happened with the golden rule, I believe in a lot of cases, it was, hey, treat others how you want to be treated when I want you to, or in accordance with how I want it. And I'll let you know when that is. And so it was always an asterisk, right? On the golden rule until, well, that's not how I really meant it. I wanted to give you constructive, abrupt, harsh feedback, but I never wanted it back. And so when in that lack of communication, there has been no frame. There's been no guardrails put up of how we'll do it here. I believe when leaders get out of their own way, and it goes back to how do we get to our whole self? I really believe it's a matter of the old way of how we defined empathy, trying to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Stop. Let them wear their own shoes.
Right.
And you sit there and seek to understand. And so that way, if we actually take that posture, then I'll never assume Karen's mad at me or Tiffany's mad at me. Okay, my first question, I'm going to be more curious than confrontational. And so I need to hold a space to see, okay, where is the real conflict here? I see yelling, I see something differently, but do we have the capacity to reframe and actually have conversations based on what's actually happening? And I believe that there's a skill set, even in change management and in coaching, that organizations need to sign up for quick, fast, in a hurry, because we are rapidly moving towards this authentic language. And you said it. Authenticity is the old respect. You could be respectful without being harsh and crude, right? And so I think we're coming to that kind of that impasse where if you don't get good at language, you're gonna have a whole lot of mass exodus once the bubble opens, and people are allowed to really look, and organizations are really on the hiring block looking for people.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, it's so true about, I can give you this, I can, coach you, don't coach me. Well, no, if you got to be able to take it. If you're giving it out, you got to be able to take it. And so, with communication, especially, and just kind of where I think we've always kind of been here, but I really think over the last probably decade or so, it's just, what do they call it? The cancel culture or whatever. It's, either you're with me and you agree with me. You're with me because you agree with me. If you disagree with me, then you're absolutely against me. And I'm like, so where's the art of debate? We have lost the art of debate. We've lost the art of conversation. And that's been and really it's kind of been touted like in all of the arenas that we are, whether it's socially, whether it's, the political arena. Don't even get me started there. But, it's just where we can disagree. We all have different experiences, right? And that's what makes us a unique body, right? But it's, learning to understand, or at least learning to even listen to what those differences are without, again, trying to fix them or trying to edit them. It is, so yeah, the art of debate and this the art of conversation. We need to get back to the art of true conversation. And, everybody shouldn't agree on 100% of everything, because that's really boring and it doesn't, and you don't grow from that. Like if I only interface with people that are military kids like I am, I grew up in the Midwest, went to Indiana University, shout out Hoosiers. Like if I only did that, like I would have no concept of anything other than what I know. Like, and that's just, you don't grow that way. You don't evolve that way.
Karen, I know one of the early conversations we had about just this community in general and kind of the call to action, even when we were thinking about just expanding just the conversation, right? And your posts about, hey, what do you all want to hear? What do you all want to see? Like it's almost like playing double dutch with people, and as it pertains to engagement and conversation. What I believe is going to really propel us into the future is, like you, Tiffany, you said it several times, getting in the game. Yeah. Like we need people to get in the game, and that's the only way you find out what works and what doesn't, and then actually collect data on it. Like that, like that's the whole part. And when you both think about, I think there's a semblance in what we're not saying is fear.
Yeah.
What's some of the fear that you all have been hearing coming up for people?
I'll just say that, fear is, I find, at the heart of all the conflicts. When I watch people post online and get into debates with each other, it's like, this is my fear, and it directly conflicts with your fear. And what they're not seeing is that, they're like, your fear is invalid, but my fear is valid. And it's just saying, like, all the fear is valid at some level, but we have to talk about the immediate threats and be able to decide what to do about them constructively, and be accepting that other people have fear. That is a natural biological reaction to stress is fear. And that's when change comes along, we instantly resist it. That is an instant reaction, but we can consciously, because we're conscious beings, say, I recognize this as fear. I recognize this as resistance. I recognize this as my ego, and get better at recognizing it and faster at recognizing it. And then saying, now that I see as an observer of myself that this is what's happening, I can then just like allow it. Just be like, that's cool. I'm having some fear. I'm resisting some change. And only then can you really start to work through that. Again, we always say it all starts with self-awareness, as Tiffany was saying, knowing yourself, right? I mean, the obvious place to start. Tiffany, I'll let you talk about the fears you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I think it aligns a lot with what you're saying, Karen. Like, fear is natural, and fear is, it's a part of our biology. I mean, that's baked into us. And so some of the fears that, I am seeing or hearing, what's next? Like, everybody's already dialed into what's next, and the fear of not knowing. I'm like, but when have we ever known? We've never really known what's happening, right? So I think there's a lot of fear about, what's happening in the workplace, what's happening, in the world. I mean, we don't know, and that's a concern, but it's something that we have to manage, and we have to, plan for. Unfortunately, you plan for the unknown. You have to, but and then I think people are afraid. There are people that are afraid of, if I am my true whole being, my whole self, how is this going to impact the relationships that I hold so dear, or these relationships that I built? And so, my challenge to that is, well, if that is a fear, are these relationships really authentic? And are these the relationships that, if you invested this time into building these relationships, was it time well spent? How can you reinvest somewhere else? So I just, it's just change is absolutely the scariest thing ever. And it's a natural reaction. That's the first reaction to change for most people is, oh my gosh, everything is changing. I'm afraid. I'm fearful. We have to move past that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we have an opportunity, right? When we talk about leading through change, and again, one of the T-shirts that I think all of us have been given at some point, we probably got whistles and mouse pads for it now, is modeling the way. And I think we need to change that thing to stumbling forward. I really believe that's really what we want to say. We really are stumbling through this thing. And to your point, Tiffany, is really we have no clue. Like anybody who is, I love the crystal ball people who try to be the strategists of what's next. This is unprecedented. So I believe if we literally, this is the most amazing co-creative time that in all of our lives, particularly us that are in the consulting space, coaches, just what do you want to see? I think because nobody has ever and it's only been in theory to have that type of conversation, but to really not know and literally what do you want this to look like? It's freaking people out. It's literally freaking them out. The fact that they this is a real conversation that I'm allowed to have. What? I never thought I would be alive to see this be real. And I believe that's what's causing a lot of people pause, is because they loved being predictable. And nobody is nobody's wanting to fess up to that. And again, those who fess up to it, those are the ones that we're seeing on the cancel culture ends of the spectrum of crazy. Right. And they're you're either with me or against me, and there's no middle of communicating in nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think those of us who dare to communicate in the middle are the ones that are going to be the game changers and thought leaders moving forward. Guess what? We're stumbling through this thing. Why don't you stumble with me until we're able to walk again? It's literally old school, crawl, walk, run. Mm-hmm. Is everybody willing to slow themselves down enough to where you could actually put some things in place, crawl enough, get some data, then begin walking enough to get some data, but then, okay, let's pick this up to a jog. We're not going directly to run yet, right? And I believe because of that, people, we gotta go fast. And that's been the part that I believe you slow down, speak slower, and breathe. Right. That's literally the one, people are afraid to breathe because they catastrophize so much that up to this point that it's okay, we could actually be thoughtful about how we move forward. Let's do it together. And so when you think about that, Tiffany, as a change leader and in this new year, what are some of the programming that you're thinking about introducing to your audience?
You said something that I say almost every day. I literally say it almost every day. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. Sometimes you have to stop to even get going, right? And so I think one of the things that we have to deprogram is this whole notion of busyness, right? We are, the workforce is I'm in meetings, I'm in doing this, I'm in emails and all of that. And so we equate that with success, right? I'm being successful in this role because I'm on, back to back phone calls. I've got all these things to do. We've got to deprogram, what success in a role or what forward movement in a role actually looks like, because it's not that. You have to have time to think and to process and reflect, and that's something that when moving forward into, introducing new programs and development to leaders and aspiring leaders, it's okay, let's kind of define what that looks like. What's the new or the next level of success? It's not the like, for example, we're talking about, especially in this COVID situation. That's what I keep calling it, the COVID situation that we're in. Of course, now we are remote and really from a work from anywhere culture, right? But of course, we need to still stay engaged. And so what does that mean? Zoom meeting at 8, Zoom meeting at 9, 10, 11, 12. Like, that's what that means, or that's what it's turned into. And now we're looking at, something as simple as no meeting Wednesdays. Like, give people an opportunity and a space to reflect and to process all of the information that they're receiving. We have not done that. I mean, regardless of whether we were in COVID situation or not, we haven't done that in years, because it's always about what's the next thing. Okay, I've got this done. Now what's the next thing? Got this meeting. Now what's the next thing? And leaders have, praised individuals for that. And I think that's something that we have to, as leaders, people managers, we've got to really redefine that for people, because we've created a culture of burnout and we reward people for burnout, but then turn around and tell you, oh, take care of yourself and don't be burned out. Well, that has to happen on the front end as well as the back end.
Yes, schedules have to allow for time for reflection.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. How can you be a leader and not reflect on your actions? I have this image that I created for a PowerPoint one time, and it's just, like, reflect first, make a decision, take action, reflect again. You have to be able to say, is what we did the right thing? And I know some people also torture themselves with reflection at the same time, and they reflect on everything and hyperanalyze everything. But to analyze is better, even overanalyze is better than to not analyze at all. Mm-hmm. And you have to also take into account that it's not even just processing, it's also grief. It's ambiguous loss. We have that uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future. Mm-hmm. And we also, we'll go through that cycle of being in denial and then being angry. And, like, we're going to go through that. And we're also going to do some things and say some things maybe that we're not very proud of in the middle of that process. And we have to just give each other that grace that, like, hey, this is what you're going through. We're all going through it. And there's this image that I also have in my head of this mountain with a beach. And it's like, there's this place on the top that's like nirvana, where people have climbed the top. They've come off the beach. They can see that there's a wave coming. It's a wave of change. It's coming. It's inevitable. The people on the beach are kind of oblivious to it. They're in vacation land. They don't want you to tell them that the wave is coming. They're just like, we're on the beach and we're cool. And then there's the people who are, as Lawrence was saying, the coaches and the consultants who are trying to get people from the beach to the top of the mountain, to a safe place for change, where you can see the change coming and can plan accordingly. And it's not a linear path up the mountain. There's crags and there's going to be, rock slides. Apparently, you might go up and come back down again. And that's where I see the role of the coaches and consultants taking right now, is getting people, as many people are willing right now, like, take the people who are willing up the mountain, get them up there. The people on the beach may have to be washed away before they learn, but I hope not. That's kind of like the weight of what I feel sometimes, and what I'm trying to work through is that's not just my weight. And that's why this community was created, because we can all share that weight. The more people we have ushering people up the mountain, the more people will get to the top of the mountain. And not that I believe that there's an actual perfect nirvana, and even when you're at nirvana, sometimes it can be easy to forget what it was like to be on the beach, because, and you can also find yourself on the beach, like, sucked into wait a second, this beach is kind of cool. Maybe I'll just stay here for a little while. And then you got to remember, we got to get up the mountain.
I mean, I love the beach in general.
Yeah.
I do love the beach.
I love the beach. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Karen, though. It's just, there's always these different stages, and it's okay to be in these different stages. Everybody doesn't have to be at the same stage at the same time. And I think that we absolutely, we encourage people sometimes to move faster than what they need to move. And, because again, success is equated with action, 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 action. Like, gotta constantly do, gotta constantly do. And sometimes, the most successful people that I know, just from an entire whole life standpoint, successful family, successful career, all that, they are the biggest reflectors. They take the time and they are intentional about it to really, understand what's important and how do I, pour the energy into what's important for that moment. My husband, a long time ago, because I'm a doer, I am a checklist person. And I was in grad school, this was years ago, and I'm like running around like crazy, like trying to get things scheduled, doing this, doing all that. And he was like, to me, you look like a crazy person. I just want to let you know, you look really crazy. Like, you're running around here. I'm like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? He's like, I want you to sit down. I want you to draw a circle. That circle represents 100%. You can never give more than 100% of yourself at any given time. When people say it's like, I'm giving 150% of myself to this, 200%, it's impossible. And he was like, and you can't give, you're never going to give a whole 100% to something. I want you to draw out what that 100% looks like. I want you to draw out, what percentage of yourself are you going to give to your career? What percentage of yourself are you going to give to your family? What percentage of yourself are you going to give to your friends and other pursuits or whatever? Draw it the way that you envision it to be. Draw it the way it is today. And that is your starting point. If it's not, if what you're doing today, if your 100% doesn't add up to the way you want it to be today, then that's where you need to start making your changes. And that's probably some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my life. Because now I'm like,
another analogy that I heard about parenting it was really like a support for moms, but really anybody who's busy and so busy that they can't reflect. Your husband must be a coach of some level. No, really? Well, he was your coach in that instance for sure.
Yeah, he was definitely my coach in that instance. He's a very pragmatic person, and he's very pragmatic about, that's where I'm reflective. He's pragmatic. So we kind of like, we're yang to each other, but he's like, yeah, you look crazy. Like, you're going to run yourself into the ground. And because you're trying to give too much of yourself to things that aren't of equal importance. So you got to decide like what that looks like. And, and I do it all the time now. I'll do it at least on an annual basis. I'm like, okay, how much time did I spend here? How much time do I want to spend here? What I really want to give. And so, yeah, that's some of the best advice I've ever gotten.
Yeah.
It's like the spinning a lot of plates analogy, where it's like you have all these plates spinning, and it was again for moms, and it was like, and that's another thing we have to think about, because we have people who are not just managing a lot of spinning plates at work, but they're managing a whole bunch of spinning plates that we can't see at home. And there might be this default, like, well, you can take care of that reflection at home in your own time, but that's not a reality either, because we're all spinning all these plates. And the key was knowing which plates some plates are gonna drop. The key is knowing which plates to let drop and potentially break, and which to keep spinning, which I thought was just, it was like a permission to let some things go. I can't be, the PTC mom and get the cookies baked and, like whatever it happens to be on my list, like I'm going to take some plates off, maybe so I can keep these other plates spinning so they don't break.
Yeah, something very similar. A good friend of mine, we speak in analogies, but it's she would say it's something very similar about the spinning plates, but she had about juggling balls. Like, we always juggle a lot of balls in our lives, right? Some balls are rubber, some balls are glass. You can't afford to let the glass ones drop. You can drop the rubber and they'll bounce right back up. You just have to realize what is what. Which balls are glass, which balls are rubber. What can you afford to kind of like, if you drop it, it's not detrimental. If you drop the glass ones, that's detrimental, and they break. So yeah, we just have to, we say it like a lot of us do. Now we just have to live it.
Yeah. And it's funny, as we talk about, the work-life balance thing, right? Is really, as you both were describing those analogies, it really is. That's not a thing. And what you're really trying to tell yourself, and it's like the circle exercise. What's the priority today? And again, Karen, you can't fragment yourself. And to think that in the role of spouse, okay, that's one plate. In the role of employee, that's one. No, there are multiple things that you have to consider. And again, you talk about juggling, Tiffany, like all those glass ball, like it may be one per hat. And you're like, oh my God. And so if you're only doing the work stuff, that's why people get burnt out at work. Is because they actually, like Phil's comment, they actually have to sweep up the home stuff that they dropped.
Right.
And so when people make decisions to leave organizations, something made them sacrifice more than they were willing to. And now they were harmed by it. And now they're hurt by something. And so when organizations don't take time to build people up and develop people, particularly leading through change, everything I believe in the last 50 minutes we've been describing is talking about doing personal internal work first.
Mm-hmm.
That circle exercise, what we do in coaching and all of that starts with the person. Not point back at you, not out, right? Because that's the naming and the blaming and the shaming, all of that stuff. No, point the finger back at you so that you could start in the right place. And when we make us a priority, when we begin to get whole personally, then we could begin to have interactions in a very productive way, even in conflict, right? There's a whole thing around constructive conflict, right? And so that we're able to identify what are we trying to lead through and what's the priority here? And so instead of us saying everything's important, we can actually see things for what they are, and we begin to make decisions the right way and frankly, a healthy way. And so when you think about, Tiffany, you're thinking about 2021, what's going to be your go-to as you begin the process and look inside, but also as you look at your team and development? What's going to be something that you really hone in on and focus on?
2021. Wow, I cannot believe that we're actually here. It's December, what? I've lost track of the days. Third? Oh my gosh.
I know.
It's been the same day for like 6 months, 9 months. What I'm going to hone in on, and what I've been kind of honing in on, is I'm trying to think of how to put it, and I can only put it the way that my grandmother, God rest her soul, would always say to me: you've got to take care of you. And like you were just saying, the whole introspection piece, right? I think, as I'm looking at coaching and developing, understanding that, again, you cannot be any good to anybody else if you're not good to yourself. And I think there's been so much that we've been conditioned, that we've been trained, that just, like selflessness is all about other people. Actually, it's really not, right? It's actually, you can't be selfless if you can't be selfless if you don't take care of yourself. And so as we talk about changing cultures and changing the way that we lead through change, all of that stuff, we've got to redefine selflessness and be able to integrate and incorporate that into what we do from a professional sphere as well as a personal sphere. So I think for me and my teams and the people that I support, it's really about understanding we've got to not even get back to, because I don't ever think we were there, but we've got to get to a point of, that if we ever going to go define who our whole self is, knowing who that is, really, really, and focusing on that, and not being, shamed as to put the priority there. Because I think that's where a lot of it comes from. Oh, well, you have to think about everybody else. And if you think about yourself, then that's selfish. It's not selfish.
I heard a great statement, another probably meme, but
right. 2020 has been the year of the meme. It's great.
Putting your needs above other people's wants is self-care. Putting your wants above other people's needs is selfish.
Exactly. And yeah, it's just, I think there is, like this year has shown us that, I've got to go back to my grandmother. If you don't move, the universe is gonna move you. Like if you don't move, and this is exact 2020 is we haven't moved. We've done the same thing. We said we want to do things differently, but we've done the same thing because again, repetition, routine, that's comfortable. Like, you know what? I know that I shouldn't work 80 hours a week, but I'm used to it. What else am I going to do? Right? Like that's what the people's mindsets are. So I'm like, okay, the universe is giving you all the signs like we need to move, we need to change. And now the universe, okay, you're not going to move. So now I'm going to force you to change. And now this is where we are. And
it's forcing change everywhere.
Forcing change. We're in the middle of the biggest agile change experiment. And instead of 2-week sprints, it's 2-hour sprints. And everybody's a part of it and nobody got any warning or any notice. Mm-hmm. And so people who are truly, there's people who say that they're agile, and then there are people who are truly agile. And this is what this 2020 experience is really showing. Okay, we say we value agility as a value, in a corporate space or in a personal space. Are you really agile? Or do you think you're agile?
Absolutely.
Yep. I just think
make
a lot of
2020
times that was
the year of perfect hindsight.
Exactly. There we go.
Perfect hindsight. Oh my gosh. I hadn't even thought about it. I had not even thought about it. December 3rd, 2020. The year of hindsight.
Hashtag the year of hindsight.
Yes.
This is Tiffany, thank you. And Karen, thank you for just imagining what C3 could be so we could bring on awesome people to have these
conversations. It wouldn't be what it is without you, Lawrence. So thank you. And Tiffany, I appreciate you so much being here. It was really great to get to talk to you for an hour. I look forward to connecting with you and co-creating in the future.
Yeah. And everyone, before we go, our audience that's out there, if you ever want to join me and Karen in our monthly panel discussions, be an expert thought leader that we bring on to help us all pontificate about some and banter a little bit, join the C3 LinkedIn group so we can see you there and just continue to build community. And Tiffany, president-elect for ACMP, look, join professional organizations because they are a godsend, and particularly as it pertains to not just networking and connecting, but building relationship and community. That's really what we're going to need in 2021. And so it's all about community. Find yours.
And thank you to the people who are on with us today, engaging.
Definitely.
We appreciate you too. Thanks for being here.
All right, everyone. Until next time.
Next year.
Next year. Holy smoke. We've been talking about 2021, and that's literally in a couple weeks. All right.
Over.
Oh, good. Continue to be safe. Continue to wear your masks.
Please wear your mask.
How about that?
Yeah.
How about that? In zombie apocalypse, if you take the vaccine. Anyway, so until next time, we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.